couple of months ago, I made a Rocket Lab valuation model based on the first iteration of this model. And now that I've updated it, I'd like to correct some of the stupid things I said in that video that people in the comments didn't point out enough. Please, if I say anything stupid in this video, please point it out immediately so I'll have to make a part 3. Right? I don't want to say any stupid things in these videos. Please point them out when I do. Right? I'd like to correct the past stupid things I said and give an update on this model, which I think, given the models I've seen on the internet of Rocket Lab, I think this is one of the best, aside from Scotto, who made an immensely detailed model. Okay. In one of the corners, I'll put a link to Scotto's video. Go watch that one on his Rocket Lab valuation model. Insanely detailed, many insights. I've gotten many insights from these videos, from his videos. Go watch them. First, I'll get into the base model. Nice edit there. I have Electron launches going up to around 30 launches per year in 2030. I can make a very long video and a 10,000 word blog post about the commercial launch market. I think Electron and Neutron will go the way of a niche launch provider. More Neutron than Electron, I think. Neutron, I'll get to Neutron later. Electron is a small sat dedicated small sat launcher to orbit. I think you can even see how many. I'll pull up my exact post. Here's the post. Rocket Lab has launched 40 times, assumed 2.5 payloads on average. This is 100 payloads that they have launched to orbit, small satellites, while SpaceX has launched roughly 800 payloads. Obviously, rideshare on transporter-like missions outperforms dedicated small sat launch in very many ways. You can see just based off these numbers, 100 versus 800. One of these is a niche. Electron fills the niche, which you can say this gives them some security because they're obviously the most successful dedicated small sat launch company in the world ever. This gives them some security of their Electron business. And you can see other companies that have attempted to do this, like Astra failing spectacularly, right? Give them some security in this, but I don't think this market will grow very much in the future, right? We're currently in a paradigm of partially reusable rockets, transitioning out of a paradigm of expendable rockets. This is incredibly exciting, right? But in the future, in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to a paradigm of fully and rapidly reusable rockets. What market is there for dedicated small sat launch in a paradigm of fully and rapidly reusable rockets? I don't think it's very big, right? I wouldn't be too surprised if Electron is canceled in the 2030s, 2040s at the absolute latest, right? So Electron is a niche launch provider. This is what we've gotten to. Now, expenses per launch, I have this going down to $3.5 million. There's, in Scotto, in one of his amazing videos, go watch his videos on Rocket Lab. Amazing. He broke down what he thought the expenses per launch could be, and he found in one of Rocket Lab's quarterly filings, somewhere a very esoteric location, let's say, that they actually gave a breakdown of how much Electron's expenses per launch were. And if you pile this on, if you add in the cost of marine assets when they recover these launches, I think you get an answer of around $4 million per launch. I have this decreasing to $3.5 million in the future, being slightly optimistic in the base model. Right. Scotto did a very detailed video on this. Watch that video if you want more insight. I have revenue per launch saying slightly high at $8 million. Because Rocket Lab is a niche launch provider with the Electron rocket, I think this fair, if not. Really, the market is not small satellites, it's dedicated launch of small satellites. For a few satellites, this is important, like for the Tropics missions that they did in 2023. These need to be launched at a specific time to a specific orbit. Very, very useful for this type of launch. I think this market peaks, obviously, but I still think you can charge a premium for this over a transporter-like mission like SpaceX's. So I think $8 million is fair to assume that they stay at this price for a few years. I'm working on currently, you can see this model, just much more complicated. There's a lot more data here than the Rocket Lab model. I'm making a model of the commercial satellite launch market. Hopefully in the future, once this is complete in a few months, there's a lot of work. There's over a dozen hours put into this. Hopefully when this is complete, I'll have a more complete picture of how the S-curves are looking in the commercial satellite launch market. It's very easy to predict S-curves, right? So with this, I'll even show this is slightly the wrong time scale, but you can see there's an exponential curve going on here. if you have some insight into where S-curve levels off, you can predict very easily how the shape of the S-curve looks. So once I complete this, I'll make another update video. Right. This is the 2 tasks in the to-do to complete this model, commercial satellite model. Right. R&D, I have R&D going down to $30 million and staying there. There will still have to be some work done on Electron, even when it's launching very regularly. So I think this is a fair place for it to level off. Now you can see the gross profit of Electron getting to around $135 million per year in the future. This is slightly impressive for SmallSat launch, but when you look at how much SpaceX's revenue is going to be, it's a lot more than that, right? We'll move on to Neutron now. Now Neutron, I think Neutron is at risk of becoming a niche rocket as well, right? We can see, we can look back at this data. In 2023, we'll fix this. 2023, we see there were around 57 constellation missions and 44 commercial missions, right? Constellations are, I think, going to be the vast majority of launches in the future over just regular commercial satellites, right? I think this constellation number might be slightly off. I think some of the other smaller constellations like Planet Labs are included in commercial, right? So this just goes to show constellations are what you want to be aiming for to launch, right? I'm not sure Neutron is optimized to launch constellations, right? First, we can see that it seems like it's a slightly undersized rocket. You can compare it to something like Relativity's Terran R, which has around 30 tons to orbit, which means you have a lot more payload capacity, and you can go RTLS. You can land back on land at your launch site. Save a lot of money doing this. Marine assets suck, one of Peter Beck's best quotes. So for Neutron to get the most out of its payload capability, and it has a slightly low payload volume too, it has a relatively small fairing, Neutron will have to land at sea with low payload volume, with low payload mass. This is not the best architecture, I'd say. Something like Relativity's Terran R I'd be more bullish on. Right? Sadly, you can't invest in Relativity, and they seem like they're a lot more value than Rocket Lab at the moment, which I'm not sure is very fair for them. So Rocket Lab is the next best option if you want to invest in a space company. SpaceX is obviously the golden goose, right? Sadly, they're not public, right? I think the first Neutron launch in 2025. The current date for the first expected Neutron launch is 2024, Q4 2024. We can apply the Burger principle. This will likely slip to 2025. They haven't even fired the first Archimedes engine yet. This is what blows my mind, right? You can see Relativity has assembled the AONR and fired it, done a full test of the AONR in 2023. They're planning to launch in 2026. Rocket Lab, in a best case scenario, they're planning to fire the engine in 2024 and launch the rocket in 2024. I don't expect this to happen at all. 2025, I think, is an okay estimate of when they will first launch Neutron, with a slightly slow growth rate until they get to 16. Back to Neutron being a niche launch provider. I'm not sure where Neutron launches will level out. The space satellite, the commercial satellite market is obviously growing exponentially, but it also seems like there's an exponentially growing number of launch providers, right? So with the added competition, with a niche, slightly low mass and low payload volume rocket, let's say, I'm not very bullish on Neutron ever getting to the amount of rockets that a Falcon 9 does. And even furthermore, because we're transitioning now with Starship and fully reusable rockets into a paradigm of fully and rapidly reusable rockets, it's not clear to me when how long Neutron will stay launching. I think we can look at my SpaceX valuation model here. I had the last Falcon 9 mission in 2039. And these are military and government launches, mainly with Dragon towards the end. Now, if Rocket Lab makes a capsule, I'll be more optimistic on the longevity of Neutron, though that will add to the R&D cost in the short term. I just said an incredibly stupid thing. I'd like to point that out. R&D cost in the short term is not something that you should actually be concerned about. You should be more concerned about the S-curve of the growth, right? Don't be a finance person. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Don't be a finance person. I don't like finance people who talk about money, right? Rocket Lab, I'm slightly conflicted that I've made these models, you know, obviously very impressive models, but disappointing that I think about this from a finance perspective. I just want to be like excited about rockets, right? That's more fun, right? Don't be a finance person. Don't worry about how much SG&A is this year. This is a very boring thing to be worried about, right? Watch everyday astronaut videos. Those are more fun. Right. Back to the topic. If Rocket Lab creates a capsule for Neutron, I'll be more optimistic on how long it'll live. And especially with the seeming explosion of how many space stations we're going to have in low Earth orbit. There's how many, 4 or 5 commercial space station programs in the US? This looks very optimistic for if someone wants to build a capsule. In capsules, you can see this breakdown of how much launches cost. Crewed launches somehow for SpaceX cost far, far more, over 4 times more than a standard launch. If Rocket Lab can break into the business, I'd be very optimistic. Okay, back to the Rocket Lab valuation model. I have just R&D simply increasing 10 to 15% per year. It's a very simple way to do it. And we can see that gross profit in 2031 is around $320 million. I think this is something that makes me more optimistic about Rocket Lab. I think they will, on a long enough time horizon, obviously they will have to make a fully and rapidly reusable rocket. There was an interview that Peter Beck recently did where he talked about Rocket Lab being a 100-year company. You're not going to be a 100-year company on a partially reusable rocket. Not at all. Partially reusable rockets are a paradigm that will survive for maybe 10 to 20 more years. Then fully and rapidly reusable. And what's beyond that, I don't know, but that'll be cool. Right? Space elevators, maybe. Who knows? Right? Rocket Lab needs to make a fully reusable rocket, fully and rapidly reusable rocket in the future, obviously. If they don't announce plans that they're working on this decade, this won't be a good outcome. I'd be pessimistic on the company if they didn't announce plans on a fully and rapidly reusable rocket towards the end of this decade. SpaceX started development on Starship in 2014 with the Raptor engine, I believe. If Rocket Lab isn't doing something similar by the end of this decade, it doesn't bode well, right? You can see some people that are immensely optimistic on Starship, saying that all satellites will be launched on Starship within the next few years because of the greater payload mass and how routine flights will be. I'm less optimistic. I don't think too many. I think the Starship ramp will be fairly slow. It'll take a while for economies of scale and really getting the cost down due to full and rapid reusability. Rocket Lab has some time, right? All the partially reusable launch companies have some time to survive until they have to create a fully and rapidly reusable rocket and transition to the new paradigm or go the way of the horse or internal combustion engine. Right. Rocket Lab needs to make a fully and rapidly reusable rocket in the future, right? And the gross profit from Neutron will help them do this, right? I have gross margins for Electron and Neutron around 50%. These numbers, for gross margins, these feel about on point. I'd like to point something out. At the end, I have Rocket Lab's net margins in 2031 being 20%. Google's net margins are 30%, which is slightly disappointing for Google. But Rocket Lab being at 20%, this doesn't feel right to me. This is the output of the model, so I'll go with what I've put in the model. But there's a feeling, I get a feeling that this isn't right. If someone in the comments has some insight into why Rocket Lab's net margins will never be 20%, intelligent insight, I'd like to say, don't say stupid things. Stupid things aren't allowed in my comments. If someone has intelligent insights into why Rocket Lab will never reach 20% net margins, please put it in the comments. I'd really like to know. This one of the places I'm disappointed in my models. If Google is at 30% and Walmart is at 1%, it feels like Rocket Lab would be closer to Walmart than Google. Google is a computer company, software company, right? The software seems like it should have higher margins than launching rockets, and it seems like software should have higher margins than 30%. Why are Google's margins 70%? Someone in the comments, please explain that too. And that's something I've thought a lot about, and I haven't seen a conclusive answer. Right. Back to Neutron. No, back to space systems. Right. This space systems number is taken from one of Rocket Lab's quarterly filings, I believe. It was either their investor day or one of their quarterly filings. This is just taken directly from that, then apply a market share number, which is a slightly crude way to do it. I think Scotto has gone into a lot more detail here. I might make another video updating this model to be much more precise. Scotto, one of the corners, go watch Scotto's video. Amazing videos, many insights in those videos. Great videos. This is a slightly crude way to do it compared to him. Right, we can see the gross profit line around $700 million in 2031. It's my estimate. I'm just going off the S-curve of the entire market. This is, without space systems, I'd be much more pessimistic on Rocket Lab. Space systems is really, I think, what they need to stay alive. I saw, I think, Dave G and some other Rocket Lab investors talking about if they would invest in it, if it was a pure launch company like Relativity, that'd be much harder because I think space systems is, it'll help you sleep at night if you're invested in Rocket Lab, right? Space systems will really give a lot of like cushion. You can see gross profit in 2023 was around $40 million. This is amazing, right? This will really help them stay alive. This will make them have to raise less money. I do think Rocket Lab will have to raise money, but this will lower it by a few hundred million dollars, which, you know, if you're an investor in Rocket Lab, now you won't get diluted as much, or they won't have to pay as much interest on a loan or something like that. So space systems will really help them stay afloat. This is, if they didn't have space systems, I would be very pessimistic on this company. Okay, I don't want to, I'd be much more pessimistic compared to them if they did have space systems, which they do, right? If I sound pessimistic, I want to make this point. If I sound pessimistic, it's in contrast to what Rocket Lab could be, to a perfect optimistic future, right? If I'm pessimistic, I'll use an example with Tesla. When people are pessimistic and say bad things about Tesla missing deliveries estimates, right, or guidance, right, what they're really saying is Tesla grew 30% year over year. Tesla grew 25% year over year instead of 30%. Tesla grew 5% less. Company's going bankrupt, obviously. They only grew 25%. This is horrible. Complete miss. No. Growth is growth. They still grew 25%. Slightly less than you expected, but still enough to make revenue and profit go up. So if I'm pessimistic, it's in contrast to what could be, right? Onto the finance section. I'm not going to explain any of this because you know how to read. I will explain one thing. I'll go into detail about SG&A. Here we can see Rocket Lab's Q3 results. R&D, SG&A, and CapEx are rising much faster than I expected them to. Right. I think Rocket Lab will absolutely need to raise money in late 2024, early 2025, maybe mid 2025 at the latest. And if they don't do this, I'll be concerned. Either they will have completely turned around, or they will be on track to bankruptcy. Right? I don't think Rocket Lab will have much trouble raising money. This is a fairly mature company. They're doing very well. Right? We can see here the cash and cash equivalents. It goes negative in 2025. They will need to raise money before in 2025 to stay alive. So if you're a shareholder, you might get diluted. From a long-term perspective. From a long-term perspective, you should expect to get diluted. Right. This is something to be aware of. You're a Rocket Lab investor. Right. Now the valuation section. I saw in Farzan Mesbahi's Tesla model that he derived the price to earnings ratio from income growth. I think this is a very elegant way to do it, so I did the same thing. All right, we can see the price to earnings ratio spikes in 2027 to keep the market cap growth going up. This is a slightly crude way to do it again, right? I think this is slightly better than just setting a multiple for the entire duration. I think deriving from income growth is a much more detailed way to do it. It's still not ideal, of course. There is no ideal way to predict the stock market. You're predicting bots and you're predicting hedge funds. This is an interesting thing to do. This is back to the finance thing. Finance is boring. Who wants to spend their life doing finance? I want to spend my life predicting how many Electron launches there will be and how much these launches will cost. This is so much more interesting than finance. I'd hate to spend my life doing finance. Being an accountant. That's such a boring job, or a lawyer, right? What else can I say about the valuation session? I don't want to say anything anymore. I won't. To the bear model, I have launches peaking at 20 in 2031. Bear model is just slightly more pessimistic slightly more pessimistic, that's the right way to say it, than the base model. Right. I should really make this more pessimistic. Really, if like everything that can go wrong does go wrong, what happens? Right. Even here, I'll make another video in another 5 months where I make an even more pessimistic model. I'll put the link to this model in the description if you want to look more closely at it, of course. Now, the bull model, this is if everything can go right, does go right, valued at $60 billion in 2031. I think, depending on the day, today I'm feeling like the bull model is more likely. SpaceX is worth $150 billion right now. This is mainly from space applications, from Starlink. So if you add in the space systems business, God bless the space systems business, I think a $60 billion market cap is much more likely. I'd like to make a more fundamental point. The core of my investment thesis, the core of my investment philosophy is investing in exponentially growing markets from a low base, right? This isn't quite the space system, the entire commercial satellite market. This is a very high base, but still it's an obviously exponentially growing market. Look at Starlink. Starlink is growing exponentially. I'll look at my space valuation model to point this out. Look at this. Look at mass to orbit. This is obviously an exponential. Whenever you see an exponential in the world, I want to invest in it, obviously, from a low base. This is how you make 10x your money, right? Look at any time in the past, any company that has grown exponentially, all the big tech companies, they're growing in exponentially growing markets from low bases. This is the ideal thing to invest in. I think this is the best investment philosophy, right? Why would you want to invest in the S&P 500? Get 10% per year? No. 10x per decade. Get 25% per year compound annual growth rate. It seems like a much just orders of magnitude better than traditional investment philosophies, right? And less risky. You're not doing something like day trading, which is immensely risky, and also finance, so boring, right? This is. I made these models because I really like these companies, and I know a lot about these companies, and I can apply my knowledge about them to create a financial model, right? And hopefully get rich in the future. This is much more interesting than going into finance. I don't see how people go into finance. That's such a wasted life. That concludes my thoughts on finance. Okay. Now, a conclusion. Rocket Lab to the moon. Scotto's videos are amazing. Go watch Scotto's videos. All of them. Amazing videos. If I'm right and Peter Beck doesn't sell any shares in 2031, he'll be worth $2 billion. Nice amount of money. Peter Beck, I think Peter Beck has been obviously instrumental to this company's success. I'm not sure how instrumental. Like, compare Elon Musk at his companies to Peter Beck at Rocket Lab. I think they're about comparable. Right? Peter Beck retires. If Peter Beck stops being CEO of this company, I think this model will be a lot lower, right? Peter Beck, like I said in an interview, he talked about Rocket Lab being a 100-year company. This makes me very optimistic, right? It's like Toyota, I think. Sometime in the 20th century, they had 100-year plans. This is how you do a company. 100-year plans. This is the time scale that you have to think on. This is the time scale that you should be thinking on for your investment philosophy. How much money will you have when you're 60? Isn't that all you're optimizing for? There's people who optimize for, like, day traders. You're optimizing for the next day? Really? You're not at least optimizing for compound annual growth rate? This blows my mind. With any investing, obviously investing should be taken from a long-term perspective. 8 years or 100 years. This is obviously the right approach. I think I'll end the video on that. Be smart.